My name is Annabella Marrow, and I was 30 years old when my 3-year relationship ended, with a sentence that sounded gentle but landed like a controlled demolition. I just need space to find myself. At the time, I didn't know that sentence would echo in my head for months or that it would eventually become the cleanest exit I'd ever made from something that was already dying. I met Daniel Harper at a friend's housewarming party. Nothing cinematic. Bad wine, too many people packed into a small living room, and a conversation that started over our shared hatred of terrible action movies and somehow lasted the entire night. He was charming in a quiet way, attentive, present, the kind of man who listened instead of waiting to speak. We started dating not long after, and for the first 2 years, everything felt steady. Not fireworks, not chaos, just real. We had routines, Wednesday dinners, lazy Sundays, inside jokes that made no sense to anyone else. We talked about moving in together, about dogs, about what life might look like if we kept choosing each other. It wasn't dramatic love. It was comfortable, mutual, and safe. And then slowly it wasn't. Around the 2.5-year mark, something shifted. Daniel didn't pull away all at once. There was no fight, no betrayal, no obvious trigger, just absence in places where he used to be present. Canceled plans, shorter texts. His laugh didn't reach his eyes anymore. When I leaned in, he leaned back, not enough to accuse, just enough to doubt myself. I told myself not to overreact. People get tired. Work gets stressful. Relationships go through seasons. I asked if he was okay. He said he was just busy. I told him I was here if he needed anything. He smiled and thanked me. So I believed him. The night it ended was a Thursday in late March. We were supposed to have dinner at his place. I brought takeout from his favorite Thai restaurant, the same one we'd gone to on our second date. Muscle memory is funny like that. You keep feeding something even after it's stopped growing. When I walked in, he was already sitting on the couch, hands clasped, eyes focused somewhere past me. "We need to talk," he said. I sat down slowly. My chest tightened in a way that felt familiar and new at the same time. He took a breath. "I've been thinking a lot about where I am in my life, about who I am outside of us, and I think I need space." I stared at him. Space like less time together. "No," he said quietly. "Space like being on my own. I need to find myself." The words didn't register all at once. They landed in pieces, sharp ones. "Are you breaking up with me?" I asked. "I don't know," he said. "I just know I can't do this right now." I felt something crack, not loudly, but deeply. "You've been in this relationship for 3 years. What changed?" He shook his head. "Nothing. That's the problem. I feel stuck, like I'm just moving forward because it's easy." "So being with me is easy," I said. "Not meaningful." "That's not what I meant. I care about you. I just need to do this for me." I sat there longer than I should have, weighing the instinct to fight against the instinct to protect myself. I could have begged, promised adjustments, offered patience, but I knew how this story went. Nobody ever convinces someone to choose them by shrinking. "Okay," I said finally. "Take the space you need." He looked relieved. "Really?" "Yes," I said, "but understand something. If you do this, we're done. I'm not waiting while you figure out whether I'm still convenient to come back to." He started crying. "I thought you'd understand." "I do," I said calmly. "You're unhappy. You want something else, but I'm not your backup plan." I stood up, left the food on the counter, walked out without looking back. And that was the moment everything actually ended. The first few weeks after I walked out of Daniel's apartment felt like withdrawal. Not dramatic sobbing on the floor pain, but a quiet, persistent ache that followed me everywhere. 3 years rewires your instincts. I'd wake up on Saturday mornings and reach for my phone to text him about brunch plans before my brain caught up with reality. I'd see something ridiculous online and think Daniel would laugh at this, then feel that hollow pause when I remembered he wasn't mine to send things to anymore. That was the part no one warns you about. Not missing the person exactly, but missing the version of yourself that existed with them. I didn't cry much in public. I went to work. I smiled when people asked how I was doing. I said I'm okay because it was easier than explaining that I was functioning but fractured. Nights were harder. Silence stretches differently at night. I blocked his number after the 3rd day. Not because I was angry. I wasn't. I did it because I knew myself. I knew that if his name lit up my screen, curiosity would win. Hope would sneak in through a crack I'd worked hard to seal. Blocking him wasn't punishment. It was protection. I didn't stalk his social media, didn't ask friends for updates, didn't leave the door open just in case. I shut it, locked it, and then I sat with the discomfort of that decision. Instead of spiraling, I did the things everyone says to do after a breakup and secretly doubts will work. I went back to the gym consistently, not to punish my body, but to exhaust my mind. I signed up for a weekend photography class I'd been postponing for years. I started saying yes to invitations instead of canceling because I might be tired. I rebuilt friendships I'd let go quiet without realizing it. And slowly something shifted. Not happiness, not yet, but stability. Around week 6, a mutual friend, Chris, mentioned Daniel casually while we were getting coffee. He asked about you, Chris said like it wasn't a loaded sentence. I kept my tone neutral. What did you tell him? That you were doing fine, keeping busy. Chris hesitated. He seemed surprised. Surprised how, he expected you to be more torn up. That landed heavier than I expected. Not because I wanted him to suffer, but because it confirmed something uncomfortable. Part of Daniel had assumed I'd stay suspended in place, that I'd pause my life while he figured his out. Did he say anything else, I asked? He asked if you were seeing anyone. I let out a short laugh. That's not his business. Chris nodded. That's what I figured. That conversation stayed with me longer than it should have. Not in a romantic way, but in a clarifying one. Daniel wasn't reaching out because he missed me. He was checking the damage, measuring whether the door was still unlocked. By the 3rd month, I noticed I was thinking about him less. Not intentionally. I wasn't suppressing anything. He just stopped showing up in my thoughts as often. When he did, the emotional charge was weaker, duller. That was also around the time I met Ryan. Nothing cinematic. A coffee shop. A comment about the book he was reading. A conversation that didn't feel like effort. We exchanged numbers, went out a few times. No promises, no expectations, just ease. I didn't tell him my whole story right away. I didn't need to. Being around him felt light, and after months of emotional gravity, that mattered. That was when Daniel's name started appearing again, not directly, but around the edges of my life. A friend mentioning they'd run into him. Someone else saying he'd quit his job. Another comment about him finding himself. New hobbies, new look, new routines. Apparently he was going through something. I didn't judge him for it. People are allowed to change. But I also didn't feel pulled toward him anymore. His journey no longer felt adjacent to mine. Then Chris told me something that made me pause. He asked me for your number. I looked up sharply. Did you give it to him? No, Chris said. I told him if he wanted to talk to you, he should respect whatever boundaries you set. A beat. He wasn't happy about that. Good, I said quietly. Chris studied me for a moment. He's been asking about you a lot lately. I think he's starting to realize what he walked away from. I shrugged, but internally something settled. Not satisfaction, not bitterness, just certainty. I'd seen this story before. The person who asks for space almost always comes back, usually right when you've stopped waiting. And for the first time since the breakup, I knew exactly what I would say when he did. By the time 3 months had passed, my life no longer felt like something I was holding together with sheer willpower. It had rhythm again. Mornings weren't heavy. Evenings didn't stretch endlessly. I still thought about Daniel occasionally, but it felt more like remembering a closed chapter than longing for a sequel. Ryan and I kept things intentionally light. We met for coffee, then dinner, then walks that turned into conversations longer than either of us planned. There was no pressure to define anything, no emotional interrogations. He didn't ask me to perform healing on a schedule, and I didn't ask him to rescue me from my past. We just existed in the same space without tension. And after what I'd been through, that felt rare. The contrast was impossible not to notice. With Daniel, I'd spent months trying to interpret silences. With Ryan, silence felt comfortable. With Daniel, I'd tried to adjust myself to fit his uncertainty. With Ryan, I didn't feel the need to edit anything. Around that same time, Daniel's reinvention became more visible. Mutual friends talked. Word traveled. He'd quit his job, started freelancing, changed his routine completely, got really into meditation and early morning workouts, apparently dyed his hair. All the classic markers of someone trying to outrun the version of themselves they'd grown tired of. I didn't mock it. I didn't romanticize it either. People are allowed to unravel, but unraveling doesn't entitle you to rewind time. Then one night, Chris texted me. Hey, just a heads up. Daniel asked me again if I'd give him your number. I stared at the screen longer than I expected to. What did you say? I typed. Same thing as before. That he should respect your boundaries. I exhaled slowly. Thank you. He said he just wants to check in. See how you're doing. I didn't respond right away, because I finally understood what that meant. Checking in isn't concern when you've chosen absence. It's curiosity. It's regret sniffing around the edges, trying to see if the door is still cracked. Later that week, another friend mentioned Daniel during a group dinner. He seems off, she said. Like he's not as confident as he thought he'd be on his own. I took a sip of my drink and kept my tone even. That's not unusual. She nodded. He talks about you sometimes. I didn't ask how. I didn't ask what he said. Because here was the truth I hadn't admitted out loud. Yet knowing he was thinking about me didn't change anything. If anything, it made me more resolved. Ryan noticed the shift in me before I did. "You're lighter lately," he said one evening as we walked back from dinner. Not in a forced way, just present. I smiled at that. Because he was right. I wasn't performing strength anymore. I was actually okay. And that was when I knew, not feared, not suspected, but knew that Daniel would reach out soon. 6 months had almost passed. The timing was predictable. It always is. People don't come back when you're waiting. They come back when you've stopped needing them to. 6 months to the day after Daniel asked for space, my phone buzzed with a number I didn't recognize. I almost ignored it. Unknown numbers usually mean spam wrong calls or something that doesn't deserve your energy, but something about the timing made my thumb hesitate. I opened the message. "Hey, it's Daniel. I know you blocked me, so I'm texting from a friend's phone. I miss you. Can we talk?" I stared at the screen for a long moment, longer than I needed to. Not because I was torn, but because I was surprised by how little I felt. No rush of adrenaline, no anger, no flutter of hope, just distance. 6 months earlier, a message like that would have undone me. It would have sent me spiraling into what ifs and maybe this means somethings. But now it read like something from another lifetime. I thought about all the nights I'd gone to sleep alone after walking away with my dignity intact. About the mornings I'd forced myself to build new routines instead of reopening old wounds. About how hard I'd worked to become steady again. Then I typed back. "I don't think you'll find me in that space anymore." I sent it, blocked the number, put my phone down. 10 minutes later, it rang. Another unknown number. I answered before I could talk myself out of it. "What the hell does that mean?" Daniel's voice was tight, sharp, with something that sounded a lot like panic. "It means exactly what it sounds like," I said calmly. "You wanted space to find yourself. I gave it to you. But I used that space to move on." There was a pause. I could hear him breathing. "So that's it," he said. "After everything we had, you're just done." "Daniel," I said evenly, "you ended us 6 months ago." "I didn't. You made that choice. I respected it." "That's not fair," he snapped. "I just needed time." "And I needed stability," I replied. "Those two things don't coexist." "I miss you," he said softer now. "I miss us. I thought maybe we could try again." I almost laughed, not cruelly, just incredulously. "Try again based on what I asked. You haven't changed. You just realized being alone isn't as empowering as you thought it would be." "That's not true," he said quickly. "I've been working on myself." "Have you?" I asked. "Because from what I've heard, you've been asking mutual friends about my life, trying to figure out if I was still available. That doesn't sound like growth. It sounds like fear." Silence. Then quieter. "Maybe I made a mistake." "Maybe you did," I said. "But that doesn't make it my responsibility to fix it." His voice sharpened again. "You didn't have to be this cold." "I'm not cold," I said. "I'm finished. There's a difference." "So you don't feel anything for me anymore?" he asked. I didn't answer immediately. I checked in with myself, honestly, and the truth surprised me with how simple it was. "No," I said, "I don't." He started crying. "I can't believe you're just throwing us away." "I'm not," I replied. "You already did. I'm just not picking it back up." He hung up. I stood there for a moment, phone still in my hand, and waited for the wave of emotion everyone says comes after moments like that. It never did. The fallout didn't come all at once. It spread quietly the way rumors always do, through side conversations, casual mentions, and concerned check-ins that carried more information than questions. I didn't hear from Daniel directly again, but I heard about him. From Chris first. "He's not taking it well," Chris said over the phone a few days after the call. "He's telling people you changed, that you're cold now, that you led him on." I closed my eyes and leaned back against the couch. "Led him on how?" "He says you were supportive when you broke up. That you made it sound like there was a chance you'd reconnect once he figured things out." I let out a slow breath. "That's not what happened." "I know," Chris said quickly. "I was there. I'm just telling you what he's saying." That was the part that stung, not because I doubted myself, but because I recognized the pattern. When regret gets loud, accountability gets quiet. It was easier for Daniel to rewrite the story than to sit with the fact that I'd taken him at his word and moved on. Over the next few weeks, the messages started coming always from new numbers. The first one was apologetic. "I'm sorry for how I handled things. I wasn't in a good place. I just want closure." I didn't reply. The second was angrier. "You owe me a conversation after 3 years. I deserve at least that." Still nothing. The third made my stomach tighten. "I'm not doing well. I really need to talk to you." I stared at that one longer than the others. Not because I was tempted, but because I knew responding would reopen a door I'd already closed for a reason. Compassion doesn't require self-sacrifice. So I stayed silent. Ryan noticed before I mentioned anything. "You okay?" he asked one evening when I was quieter than usual. "Yeah," I said honestly, "just dealing with something old trying to resurface." He nodded, didn't pry, didn't offer unsolicited advice, just stayed. That mattered more than he probably realized. Daniel's spiral became more public after that. Friends mentioned emotional posts he'd quickly deleted, late-night texts to people we both knew. Long explanations no one had asked for. He wasn't healing, he was unraveling, and he needed someone to blame for the discomfort of it. It wasn't me anymore. And that realization brought something unexpected peace. I didn't correct his version of events publicly. I didn't defend myself to people who already knew the truth. The ones who mattered understood. The ones who didn't weren't my responsibility. Boundaries don't always look dramatic. Sometimes they look like silence. And silence, when chosen deliberately, is a decision. Eventually, the messages stopped. Not because he found clarity, but because he ran out of access. 2 months passed without another unknown number lighting up my phone. 8 months since the breakup. By then, my life had settled into something that felt real again. Not reactionary, not stitched together to prove a point. Just mine. Ryan and I were still seeing each other, and somewhere along the way, the word casual stopped fitting. We didn't rush into labels or declarations. We took our time. He knew about Daniel. He knew the full story. And instead of offering opinions or ultimatums, he offered consistency. It felt different in the best way. From what I heard, and it was always secondhand, always distant, Daniel had moved to another city. A fresh start, people said. New environment, new routines, new attempt at becoming someone he could live with. I didn't ask questions. I didn't need updates. That chapter had closed, and I wasn't curious about alternate endings anymore. What surprised me most was how little emotion was attached to his name by then. No resentment, no nostalgia, no urge to check if he was okay, just neutrality. Someone asked me once if I ever wondered what would have happened if I'd fought harder, if I'd begged him to stay, if I'd waited like he seemed to expect. I thought about it honestly before answering. If I had fought, I would have lost myself trying to convince someone who was already halfway gone. If I had waited, I would have learned that patience without mutual commitment turns into self-abandonment. People who want to be with you don't need to leave to figure that out. They stay. Daniel wanted space to find himself. I gave it to him. And in that space, I found something I didn't realize I'd been missing: self-respect. I didn't hate him. I didn't wish him harm. I just didn't need him anymore. And that, more than anger or closure conversations or dramatic endings, was how I knew I'd made the right choice. Growth is important. Regret is human. But neither entitles anyone to come back and reclaim a place they chose to leave. Daniel made his choice. I made mine. And I'm happier now than I ever was in those final months when I could feel him slipping away but didn't want to admit it. The space changed everything. Just not the way he thought it would.